have told a story here before, one of an abandoned house behind my school, and of my great-grandmother maybe visiting us at night. But since then I've moved across the state. I live in Montana, where there is a lot of small town, and in all those small town you get to know people. I hadn't had many encounters here, at least not yet. I have no clue if I might someday, but lately I have been hearing more stories about here that might reveal themselves someday. But for now, I'll just tell the stories I have heard of my small town from friends and classmates. The first one is from a close friend of mine, H. This was the first story I heard. I will tell it from his point of view. It was the middle of the night, and I was asleep in my room that I share with my little brother, and my older brother was asleep in his room. Same with my mom and dad. Suddenly something grabbed my mother's hair and tried to drag her out of bed. She woke up, and so did my father, and he helped her as best as he could, as something that was invisible was pulling her hair, but it eventually stopped. And that's all I have off his story, but he has said multiple other things had happened in his home. This next story is from a classmate of mine, C. Was told half of it before I had to go. So my best friend A gave me the rest of the story, so I'll tell it as she told me. Me and A were in gym waiting for the bell to ring as she told me the story as we sit by the bleachers. C was camping with his family on the reservation. Well, C heard M, his older sister, calling out to him, and he went to go find her, but couldn't, and when he went back to the camp she was there. C asked if she called her, but she was confused. That is the end of that story, and around my school that is called C Skinwalker story. Some people might believe that M was messing with C, but I personally know M. She was my softball coach, and she's not a person to not own up to the jokes she makes. I haven't heard lots of stories from this town as I'm still fairly new here. It's been about 2 years since I've moved here, and I've been some other stories that I don't fully remember, and I don't want to get them wrong when sharing them, so I won't tell. But I do have one more stories that happened to my dad, in another small town that wasn't used to him. When I was just born, my mother and father were still together living in the country. I am the oldest, so then my sister weren't even a thought. We had 2 dogs, Belle and Lou. We don't have them anymore, as they ran off not too long after. In this certain house, things would happen that weren't even explainable. One Valentine's Day, my father gave my mother this bear, that if you pressed on a button, it would say something. I'm not sure what it was, but that's not really the point. It had recently stopped working, and was just sitting on my mom's dresser. Well, one day, my dad was in his and my mom's room alone when it went off all by itself, and that was the first thing that happened to him there. My dad was and still is a big fan of hunting. He had one of his guns leaning against the wall waiting to be cleaned, or something while he was doing something else. Then he heard the gun fall, and he looked at the gun hoping it was dented or something, but when he saw the gun, it was facing the opposite direction of the wall. Like something had pushed it. My dad always said he always felt like something was not happy with us there. But after we moved to a different house for the bigger land, there hasn't been anything like that happen to him. Those aren't the only things that happened to him. They are just the things that he has told me that I remember every detail. Now my father still lives in the same small town, but in the countryside, instead of the town on his boss's farm, he's the main person that works there with a couple of other people. But the current house we are living in there, I can't help but feel like that has its own unpleasant story. But I have one pleasant one with my youngest sister, Kay. Kay is my half-sister as my dad got remarried. When this happened, Kay was no more the 4 years old. Our big grandma, which is what we call our great-grandma on that side of the family, had died not too long ago. We big grandma visited Kay and they talked, and of course she told our dad, but our dad just that she was being a little kid, which I don't blame him. But big grandma wanted to visit Kay one more time. When Kay told our dad this time she told him, big grandma said she is happy with her Rose, or something along that line. Of course my dad didn't know who it was and called his mom and asked if she knew a Rose, and over the phone his mom said, Rose was big grandma's best friend. Of course my dad told her about what Kay said, and asked if she ever told Kay about Rose, and she said she didn't, which proved to my dad that Kay had a visit from Big Grandma. I have own more story though that is connected to the story I told last time I shared. A quick recaps of that story is two of my friends and I decided to go to an abandoned house behind our school. But we didn't end up making past the outside of it. When I was little, my dad lived in an apartment with us, his wife and us children, and my stepbrother, his mom and his sister and his then brother-in-law and their kids. And that was not too long after my parents were split and me and my sister were going back and forth. And every day, my grandmother, on our dad's side, would come over with her husband and babysit us. Well, last time I visited her, I told about the house behind the school, and she looked at me. Then she told me when she would babysit me and my siblings and cousins, I told her that in my dreams I would visit a creepy house with B. And when I told her that it was a test 7 years before I met B. My grandmother isn't a person that believes in stuff like that. And I have reason to believe that that incident of me telling her almost the same thing twice in my life, once as a tiny kid, as a dream that matched half of the story that I told her as a teenager, not remembering anything about that dream.